Over the last year, people have been uncertain about the economy, about their health, and also about their careers. Many people have held on to their jobs for a sense of security in these unprecedented times, but soon it is expected many will be ready to make a change. So Sarah is here to help us get ahead of the curve. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Tracy. And I love that you mentioned uncertainty right off the top here, because there's this interesting thing happening that I want to normalize for people. And that is, there's a lot of people in jobs that they don't like who would love to make a change. But over this past year, it hasn't felt safe to make a change because the economy doesn't feel stable. They've got so much uncertainty in other parts of their lives. So there have been people who for more than a year now, and actually even before the pandemic, but especially the past year, they've been white knuckling through their careers. And so once things start stabilizing more and start to feel more normal-ish, we are going to see a huge wave of people making career changes. In fact, the other day I heard someone use the word tsunami to describe the wave of career changes people will be making. And it makes a lot of sense to me because, everybody's just waiting for the right moment to do it. And so there's some things that people should probably think about in advance so that you're ready to be ahead of the curve, ahead of all of those other career changers, so that you don't have to compete with them as much. So if you don't like your job, you're probably wondering, should I stick it out? Should I apply for something else internally? Should I move to another company? Should I maybe even move to a whole other industry? And so people will be asking themselves those big questions soon. And the answer often depends on your specific situation.
Yeah, we've had a lot of time to be thinking about things and figuring out what we like, what we don't like, what we want to do less of at the other end of this pandemic. So what if you don't like the specific work tasks that you're doing each day?
Yeah, so if that's the reason you don't like your job, you actually have a couple of options, 3 of them to be specific. First, and this is one people rarely actually think about, but you can have a conversation with your boss and your team about doing different work assignments. Like sometimes management just doesn't know that you're not loving what you're doing. So if you have a decent relationship, you could say, hey, any chance I can get on that project, or any chance I can trade this off for this instead. So it is possible sometimes to make your work feel better in the same job if you have those conversations. Another option is to just apply for something else internally that's a little bit different in the nature of your work. And the other option is to leave and to do something else. But it usually takes you a while to find something else, right? It's not something you can do in an instant. So I always tell my clients, in the meantime, try and spend less time and energy on your work. Like instead of giving your regular 100%, maybe dial it back to 70%, because let's be real, that's probably what a lot of your colleagues are doing already anyway. And it'll just help you stay more sane in your job while you're doing it. But the big question here for most people in this circumstance where they don't really like their work is the question of how big of a change do I want? Do I want a tiny tweak? Do I want a total 180? Figuring out what components you want to keep and what you want to get rid of is a pretty tricky thing to do. That's the piece I usually help people with. And actually, maybe in the show notes, we can pop a link to my free course that I have to help people do that.
Oh, I would love to do that. We will absolutely put that on our website. And I like that you mentioned talk to your manager. A lot of us just think, well, these are the duties I've been given. I just have to do them. No, have that conversation. That's a really good point. Yeah. Now, Sarah,
Absolutely.
What if you just have a toxic work environment? What are your options?
There aren't many. I'll be real with you. So if you don't like your job, but you're not sure what the problem is, here's how you can tell if it's a work culture toxicity thing. Are you working unreasonable hours? Are you burning out? And are your colleagues also, are there a bunch of people across the company who are also burning out and working crazy hours or dealing with abusive work situations? If something is happening to not only you, but many people through the organization, and lots of people are leaving, they just can't keep employees, then it's a work toxicity problem. And in that case, I'm sorry to say, really the best option is to get out. And here's why. Developing work culture takes a very long time, and it takes a long time to change. And especially the bigger the organization is, the longer it takes for something to change. And as much as you might want to help it change, it's not something an individual can do on its own. And a lot of the people I work with have found that they've tried to make changes to improve the culture in the organization, but they're burned out and empty before they ever see any of those returns. So honestly, my best advice is 99% of the time just to get the heck out.
I think that's really, really good, solid advice there. And I know a lot of people are saying, I'm not in the position to do that, but you can start planning ahead so that you basically see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, here's another tricky one, Sarah. What if you just have a terrible boss? Like you don't get along or they're incompetent? Like, what do you do?
Boy, there's a lot of people. I'm nodding at home, I'm sure, where they're in that exact same situation. So here's the thing. A lot of people think, if only I can get upper management to understand how terrible my boss is, surely they will get rid of that person. And you know what? It rarely works. It's infuriating. It's not fair, but it rarely works for people to sort of go over your boss's head and try to report things. It very often actually unfairly has negative implications for you as an employee. So it's a very tricky, risky thing to do, and it very often doesn't have the returns that you would hope for after all of the work and all of the stress of doing it. So, you know, it's really hard for individuals to stay in these jobs when you just don't like your boss, or your boss is abusive, or there's just some sort of like mismatch with your boss, because it really impacts your mental health. I think you've heard me say the quote before, people don't leave jobs, people leave bosses. And it's really true. It's one of the main reasons why people do lose their or leave their jobs. And in that case, really your two best options are to perhaps apply for something else internally, or just to leave to another organization, or perhaps to a new industry, depending on how big of a change you want.
Yeah, we have discussed this before, and you're not going to win against a boss that doesn't want to see you win. You have such good advice always, Sarah. Thank you for that, because I think it's really important that people feel empowered and know that there might be an alternative that you haven't thought of to make your life better. You should like your job-ish. You know, it shouldn't be a place that you hate to be. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. My pleasure.